Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Van Ostren, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Business Faculty Use and Perception of Research Resources, sponsored by ProQuest and featuring Joanne Hogan. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. Along the left-hand side, you will also see a Q&A panel that you can use to submit questions or comments. We will spend some time responding to your questions during the program, so please feel free to submit these throughout. And finally, please note that today's program will be recorded, and all registrants will receive follow-up instructions on how to access the archived version. Joanne Hogan has been with ProQuest for over 10 years in various roles related to product management and new product development. She is currently lead product manager for the ProQuest business product portfolio, and she has an MLIS from Western University in London, Ontario. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Joanne.
Thank you, Jen, and welcome and thank you to all of you attendees for your interest in the results of our latest business faculty market research. Some of this was introduced at the BRASS session at ALA in the summer, but these are the full results that are presented for the first time. So here is our agenda for today's presentation. The vast bulk of this presentation will focus on the results of the survey, and I have a lot of colorful pictures to share with you today, so please bear with me. I wanted to open this presentation just with a quick recap of the survey that preceded it, and some of you may have seen this presented elsewhere, including our ACRL Choice webinar from last year. Between 2011 and 2013, we spent a lot of time interviewing business faculty, sometimes at conferences, sometimes in their offices, and then we also conducted a brief online survey that focused specifically on understanding what their non-scholarly journal content needs are. And these are the results that are presented here. So leading the way, we find that they're using things that provide current awareness of what's being done in their area. So working papers, conference proceedings, dissertations, even books, all those things that really help them get past that 2 to 3 year gap from the time a research paper is submitted to its publication. But then they also use all these other types of information, so data sets, newspapers, trade and industry publications. And these, I think, are often their research tools. This research was useful to us and has really helped us to rethink some of the assumptions and decisions we make about our business products. So we've really beefed up our coverage of things like working papers, for example. But we still have a lot of questions about what kinds of information resources faculty are using, both for research and for teaching, and how effective are they finding those resources. And that's what we wanted to explore with this survey. So these are the two hypotheses we used to help frame the questionnaire. We know from our interviews that most business faculty use free resources like Google Scholar, as well as those found in the library, but how often do they use them, and how do all of these things compare? Secondly, we wanted a deeper understanding of what the problem areas are in the teaching and the research workflow, and how can we, ProQuest, working through the library, help faculty to solve some of these problems. To answer those questions, we hired Hanover Research, a third-party research marketing firm, to host and launch a survey instrument that we designed. So there was no ProQuest branding on this survey, and there was no mention of ProQuest sponsoring the survey or writing the instrument anywhere on the survey. We really wanted the results to be as unbiased as possible. Hanover also helped us by reviewing and critiquing the questions, and then they sent an email invitation to a large email list of international business and economics faculty that we provided. One email reminder was sent out, and the survey was open for around 2 weeks in total, so it was a rather brief survey. These are the respondents. We had 90 completions of this survey, which I was actually quite thrilled about. This is many fewer than the 500-odd responses that we had from our earlier faculty survey, but it was done over a much shorter time frame. And in addition, this was a really substantial survey. There were only 16 questions asked, but many of those were very wordy, and completing the entire survey would have required quite a lot of time commitment from the business faculty who did respond. You can see there was a good mix of responses from different specializations within business, and also 80 of the 90 said that they were actively teaching courses in business and economics, and they answered some specific questions around that. Over the next few slides are a bunch of graphs that I hope will give you a good overview of the results. I should note that due to its length, there were very few open-ended questions on this survey, so where I have some ideas or some insights into the results, I will be sharing them. But there are also some areas that probably raise more questions than they answer and would require a more thorough investigation and more prodding than can be done in an online survey. So the first thing we asked is how often do these faculty use a variety of different information sources? That's from the open web to the library itself to a range of specific types of resources that you often find in business libraries. To help you visualize the results, I've color-coded the results of most of these charts so that the positive responses are always in green, the middle of the road responses are in yellow, and the negatives are in red. So not surprisingly, they use the open web very frequently. I was encouraged to see that while they may not be used every day, the library website and its general journal databases, including ProQuest, are almost all neck and neck with Google Scholar, and all are showing strong regular usage. One of the possible problems with this question is that we don't know if this means that faculty start with these resources or just end up in them or both, but it is clear that they're being well used. The physical library does not show that much use from business faculty, which probably isn't that surprising, but I was really quite surprised to see the low usage of some of the more specific research tools like citation indexes and specialized business databases like Emergent or a Thomson. To help understand why some of these resources are used or not being used, we also asked a number of questions related to what we consider kind of platform or interface issues, things like ease of access, ease of use, and use of some tools. So it's not surprising that search engines and the library website score highly for ease of access without the hassle of logins and remote access and those things. And I think we can also think of reasons why some of the proprietary sources score less well for overall ease of use. You can think of things like they're siloed on the library website somewhere. They may have authentication or browser issues. And despite that move toward a Google-like simple search that we're all aiming for, they all have their own search methods and all have to be learned for maximum results. A couple more questions on that platform kind of area probed how well these different types of resources provide convenience or save the researcher time. These results all look very similar to the previous ones around ease of use and access, with all types scoring satisfactory or better. For the final question in this area, we asked the researchers to rate these sources for tools, such as the ability to download, export, or email items. And here the proprietary sources start to catch up to the free web sources. But with only 50% or less of responses rating these capabilities as good or excellent, I think this is an area where we can all clearly improve. Next, we asked the faculty to rate these information sources around criteria related to content, and here the story starts to change a little bit. For relevance of results, the general databases and library website are considered good or excellent by 2/3 of the respondents. Google Scholar starts to drop off slightly, and then the search engines fall below 50%. Again, the citation indexes and the specialized business resources are lagging behind in this criteria a little bit. Moving to comprehensiveness, and the general databases look good, but Google Scholar and search engines are really close behind. The library website, on the other hand, loses a lot of ground when it comes to comprehensiveness. And given the high scores that the library website has received elsewhere, I think this is maybe an area that could clearly use some follow-up research to understand why, and see if factors like discovery services are having any kind of impact on that. Then the final content-related question is around the quality or the trustworthiness of the information. The good news is that when they do find information on the library website, over 80% of these faculty rated it as good or excellent for quality. The general databases also score well at over 75% for good or excellent, and here we see the citation indexes and the specialized business databases finally getting a little love from these faculty. So the faculty acknowledge that the information that's found on search engines, even Google Scholar to some extent, is inferior to what they're getting at the library. I just want to take a quick break for a second and mention that some of these results, or all of these results, are from business and economics faculty only, and their impressions will differ from faculty in other areas. So around the same time that we were conducting this survey with business faculty, my colleague in social sciences was also surveying faculty, and you can see a couple of the major differences here. So use of search engines and Google Scholar are pretty much the same between business and social science faculty, but everything else is somewhat different. 20% more social science faculty use the library at least once a week or more, with fairly decent differences in their uses of the physical library and general databases as well. The social scientists make frequent use of citation databases, however, almost 3 times more than the business faculty. And why is that? Well, probably because they also have a much higher opinion of the quality of the content in those products than their colleagues in business seem to have. So again, we would need to do some personal interviews, I think, to ferret out the differences in these perceptions. But I would guess that the business faculty have such a wide range of information types that they seek that a journal citation database just isn't enough for them. And then there could also be something about the internationalization or the interdisciplinary nature of social science research that makes it harder for them to be comprehensive in their literature search without using a specialized citation index. But really, I can't really be sure just from the numbers on these surveys. The next few slides cover our questions about what types of information faculty expect students to use for the completion of their coursework, and then to give their perceptions of how easy or difficult they think that information is for students to find. So this was a really important question for us. Faculty are busy, important people, but we can generally get them to speak with us or to answer surveys like this. We have very little access to the student user of our resources, however. Almost everything we know comes from what little user experience research we conduct, which tends to be very broad and not focused specifically on the business student, and from what we hear from business librarians. I just want to take this chance to thank anyone who's answered our questions about student needs or otherwise made sure that we were aware of them, because you truly are our conduit to that user. So first, we asked faculty to rate how useful each of these information types are to students based on their course requirements. When you look at all of these essential or somewhat essential scores that are up near 80% or more, you can see just how broadly they're expecting students to be researching their course assignments. There are a couple surprises to me here. For example, things like books, news, demographic data, even trade journals and magazines were all considered more important for completing coursework than scholarly articles. Next, we asked them to rate how easy or difficult they thought it was for students to find or access these same types of information. So here are things like national news, scholarly articles, business cases, books, even country reports are quite easy for students to find according to these faculty. But they still think there's some difficulty around things like industry and company information, even finding some magazines and trade publications, and international and local news. So these are all areas that we can improve. Given the wide range of sources that they're expected to know, and given that some difficulty still remains, we also wanted to know what value faculty put on teaching research skills to students. And it's very high, so 85% or more agree or strongly agree that students should be taught practical skills, such as how to search databases. They should come out of business school with a knowledge of the major business press, and they should be able to find and evaluate information on the open web. Over 80% of these faculty agree that students should know how to find and evaluate scholarly articles, and they should be familiar with the major market research providers. There was a little less agreement that skills in using the financial products should be taught in business school. And who should be teaching those skills? Well, a variety of people, but primarily faculty and librarians. So in this question, respondents were allowed to select multiple answers, and the answers indicate that they consider probably a team approach would be the best solution here. Let's move on to the data set portion of our program. So we've heard that business faculty rely hugely on raw data and data sets for their research, and this survey echoes that belief. So almost 40% of our respondents use data sets at least weekly, and 65% of them at least once a month. Fewer than 10% of our respondents never use data sets in their research. So obviously this is a very strong component of business faculty research. This next graph is kind of busy, and I apologize for that, but it kind of gets to the meat of our research in this area, which is what kinds of data do they use and how accessible are they? So while I give you just a moment to kind of read through this, I will say that this is another area that I think really needs a lot more granular follow-up. So we tried to cover a fairly wide range of data types, and we're probably guilty of being a little too obvious with some of our choices here. So for each of these different types, financial and market data, demographics, industry data, and some of the public and private company data, what you're seeing is a solid bar that shows how useful respondents find each of these types, followed by a patterned bar that shows how easy they feel these are to find and access. So the financial and market data is considered useful by almost 70% of respondents, but 90% of those find that easy or fairly easy to find. When you move along to the private company information, however, the operational data is useful to only around 62% of the respondents, but was rated difficult to find by almost 70% of them. So there's quite a large range of being able to find this information, with the hardest, the most difficult being the private company data. This is a slightly different view of these results. So here we're comparing how many respondents rated each of these types as totally essential to their research, so really, really important, versus difficult to find. So industry data is one where obviously it's very important, rated as essential to 43% of our respondents, but with 20% of them still having some difficulty finding it. Demographic data is also very important, but in that case was obviously not very problematic for the faculty to find at all, with 0% of those finding it difficult. So it looks like there could be some improvement in finding the public company data as well. But then you get to this kind of really strange and interesting spike at the end with the private company data. And I can't tell you how often I hear about this huge need for private company data. And yet it's rated as essential for the smallest number of respondents on this survey. When you look at the difficulty, with 2/3 of it saying it's difficult to find this kind of data, I start to wonder if that's the reason more faculty just don't bother to even use it in their research. It's just too hard to find. In general, I was surprised by the overall lack of difficulty in finding data sets, because it just seems contrary to any of the other market research that we've conducted with either with faculty or business librarians. So to see if there were any real differences by research specialization, I cross-tabulated the respondents' discipline with how many difficult to find responses they gave across all of the different data set types. And here you can see that there are some spikes in areas like marketing, for example, which made up 23% of our sample size, and over 35% of their responses said they had difficulty finding data sets. Over 40% of responses from the finance faculty, which made up 10% of our sample size, were difficult. We see operations faculty having some issues, and our 2 information systems faculty really have a lot of difficulty in finding these kinds of data types. Then there's some other findings around data sets that we've had from business and faculty in some of our earlier research and interviews, where faculty tell us just all the time that they have problems identifying, finding, and accessing data sets. And that's not their only pain point. So government data, they say, is the easiest thing for them to find, but the most problematic for them to clean up so that it's in a usable form. Librarians have also told us things like, most users struggle to find data sets. They don't know what databases contain the different types of data, and it's really not that easy to find data on the open web. So again, I think some follow-up is needed to understand the data needs, especially within the different business specializations, and to go deeper into the types of data that the faculty require. I'm sure there are a good number of very niche data types that we just did not ask about in this survey. And just a couple final questions about data sets. About 1/3 of these faculty use the library for help finding data sets, compared with about 2/3 that do not. And faculty believe that library and the business department, are pretty equal when it comes to funding access to data sets, with a few other areas contributing as well, such as the IT department or the faculty's own funding sources. Okay, you might be wondering what these results mean for ProQuest and why we undertake this kind of research. Here's an overview of the platform or interface-related questions from earlier on. Looking specifically at the database results, these scores are okay. We're not Google, and we have to continually balance the needs of our company and our content partners around things like security and revenues with the needs and expectations of our end users, and with a wide range of end users at that. So we have to balance the student desire for the simplest possible search experience with the more advanced search experience of others, including librarians. So we know from looking at our usage stats and our analytics that there are not very many people using the command line search feature in ProQuest or even the thesauri, but we know that our librarian users count on those features. So we will always have to be looking for new ways to support those needs and also to improve things like accessibility, ease of use, and the tools that we offer. Let's switch now to the content results, and this slide actually makes me pretty happy. Yes, these faculty are using free web resources. They're easy and they're convenient. You know, you can probably find a journal article in an airport to read on your plane without having to deal with remote logins and proxy servers and all of that stuff. But many of these clearly recognize that the library and its resources provide the highest quality information, and in some cases the most relevant and comprehensive as well. And these faculty expect their students to be researching broadly in order to complete their assignments and to build up that skill set, that research skill set that can serve them in their careers. So for many of these content types, they think that students are able to access them fairly easily. But then there's these other ones, company, industry, and country information that really kind of key market research information that helps them to solve practical, real-world problems. And here there's still room for improvement. So this is some of the areas that ProQuest has really been focusing on to try and help with. Our biggest database, ABI Inform, for example, this is one where we're really continuing to focus our efforts and our investments on content that solves the problems that we hear about from librarians and users. So almost every day, information providers ask us to include their content in ProQuest, and those range from very large, expensive providers to small open access publishers. So on top of any royalties that we would pay to these publishers, there are resource costs involved with normalizing and ingesting that content. And in these days of library budget constraints, there's only so much scope for passing those costs on to you, our customers. But our products have experienced quite a lot of aggressive growth over the last few years. And these are just a few items that we've added to ABI Inform in the last 18 months. So obviously more journals and magazines, because it is primarily a publications database, but there's also some really nice market research sources that have been added. So Experian, for example, is the largest single data set we've ever added to ABI, and is great for helping students find which U.S. companies are working within a certain city or industry. And then we've also expanded our relationship with the Economist Intelligence Unit, and we'll add about 79 of their country reports soon, as well as an archival collection, which I'll cover in a moment. So as you can see from these, we've really been putting a lot of focus on meeting that student need. That is the most pressing need that we hear about from business librarians. And there's this tension I've encountered recently, however, that seems to be a shift toward the faculty need and a reliance on faculty input when it comes to making buying decisions. So now I think we have to make a really tough decision on whether we start to put more effort into supporting the faculty end user and finding out what the best ways to do that are going to be. I'll just finish up with a quick slide on each of the 3 new products that we've released that I also think have some relevance with some of these questions. I won't go into much detail, but if you have any questions about them, please feel free to contact me or your ProQuest account manager. So as I mentioned earlier, we will be releasing a historical archive of the EIU country reports from 1952 to 1995. That product's available as a one-time purchase, and all of the charts in those reports have been keyed in so that they can be downloaded in Excel format for manipulation by the end user. So I think this is going to be really useful for meeting that kind of need around country reports, and even to a certain extent for historical data sets. JP Morgan Research is a new collection of that bank's equity and economics analyst reports from 2011 up to current times with a 7-day embargo. So this is a product that we designed as a really affordable, student-friendly option for finding that great, detailed, insightful company and industry information that analyst reports are so good for. And then international data sets it's a bit of a departure for ProQuest from aggregating published material to aggregating actual raw data. So we've gone out and collected and normalized thousands of data points, primarily from governments and NGOs, as well as a few proprietary sources. And this is something that helps students find and compare demographics, social economic indicators, and much more at the national and subnational level. It also gives faculty access to a normalized and cleaned up version of some of that government data that we always hear from them is so difficult to find and work with. And finally, to help ensure that the library website and its resources like ProQuest are easily found and used, we continue to expand our discoverability. So most recently, we've entered into a discovery or data sharing partnerships with Ex Libris Primo and with OCLC. And we're working all the time on bringing together our diverse resources so that you can find ebooks or government information, say, alongside everything else that you might have on the ProQuest platform. And then under that tools there, we've also been working on expanding our RefWorks capabilities into a more robust experience called Flow, and then integrating that into the ProQuest platform as well. So that's the end of this presentation. I really hope you find the results of our research gratifying, or at least interesting, and I am happy to take any questions. Okay, this question from Lisa Martin, who wants to know, why is direct survey access to students so difficult? So early on I mentioned we get good insights on faculty, and we have very good insights from librarians, but it's not very easy for us to actually access the end user student. Lisa says, surely it's not hard to put up a survey to require respondents to access the survey through an email sent to their school email, or prove that they are students, and then generate the survey results. That's a tricky one. I mean, we do put up some surveys on the platform and get feedback from users that way, and we can often find out if they're students, but we tend not to actually go after, especially after emailing students directly. We just think that that would be kind of intrusive. The best thing we can do is work with some schools to actually go in and conduct what we call as usability surveys, where we either sit with them in a room and take them through a series of exercises and find out how they do their research. We've even actually sat with them in dorm rooms and observed them that way, but to actually go out and survey and email students is not a method we've used. Reese asks, regarding print books and licensed research databases, am I wrong in surmising that business faculty are less likely to use those resources they deem important, easy to use, and highly recommended compared to other information avenues? There seems to be a dichotomy between how they rated business monographs and licensed research databases and their use of such resources. That hasn't been, I mean, that's an interesting question. It hasn't been my experience. I mean, I actually find the business faculty more likely to use the easy-to-use things. And in some cases, I've spoken to some faculty where they expect especially their graduate students, to be the ones going out and looking up the more complicated information. I think it's one of those things that probably depends on their subdiscipline and what they're using. Again, that question around the really specialized business financial packages, the Mergents and the Thomsons and things like that, where I was really surprised to see how little use, or let's say, put it a different way to say, how many were not using that or claiming not ever to use those resources. But I'm sure you know that it only takes one or two in your department to be using them and to totally rely on them for their research. Anthony Raymond wants to know if we have many corporate customers for ABI Inform. So many of our databases are used to support faculty and student research, but they can also be used in the corporate workplace. Yes, we do have a lot of customers for ABI Inform. We have different versions of ABI Inform, so there are some corporate customers who access that same version that you have. And then we have different versions of ABI that sit on our corporate dialogue interface that has different kinds of search functionality and capabilities that are designed to the corporate user. Steve Grigi asks, what's the best source for private company data? I know there's a lot of excitement around a product called Privco. I haven't used it myself. Within ProQuest, actually the Experian data we just loaded I think is really great for private company data. It's got 44 million U.S. company records in it, including millions of private company ones. So it doesn't give you a whole lot of detail. I know getting at operational data and stuff like that from private companies is difficult and is going to remain difficult probably. But to find out how many private companies are working within a certain industry or region or something like that, actually Experian is quite useful for that. And then I'm pretty sure Dun & Bradstreet also has some pretty good information on private companies. Somebody's asking for the ProQuest LibGuide URL. I'm going to have to look that up in a moment. I will get to that. Your sample set was all business schools or schools which feature a business branch within an overall curriculum. Our sample set was business faculty, so we collected names and email addresses of business faculty and departments all over the world. We had to be careful with some of the regions that have kind of no emailing legal issues. So Canada was not very well represented, for example. In Canada, you have to opt into a mailing list. But yeah, we didn't focus on schools or departments. We actually focused on faculty. Oh, somebody mentioning Lisa Martin suggesting that I work with BRASS or another library avenue to gauge how librarians would feel about surveying students. We have a couple of different ideas about trying to get to the student end user, and one of them is definitely working with some business schools and maybe having them help us get some events together with students, and I'll definitely pursue that. Thank you. In the new International Datasets product, are datasets downloadable in a form that can be manipulated by students, or are they only pre-digested? No, they are in forms that can be downloaded by students. So if you find a data set you want, you can export it in various formats, including Excel or raw data, CSV, I think. And you can also kind of mash up the different data sets. So you can, if you find one data point you like, you can then create another search and layer on different data sets on top of that and then export them all. Some other interesting things you can do with that product is create a URL into that data set. And then as it gets updated over time, you're always going to have an updated view of that data set. And you can embed it in web pages or documents or things like that. Anthony Raymond says, my experience is that undergraduate business students depend on the free World Wide Web only and only use licensed databases when required to do so by their instructors. That's my belief as well, but also that the library has a very large role in making sure that the students understand which databases to use. And I have heard that things like the LibGuides and anything that you're doing on the website to help students understand where to go and where to find these resources is much appreciated. What is the difference between a website and article database in your surveys? Okay, so I didn't show you exactly what the questions look like, but we were quite explicit in the survey about what these different kinds of information are. So we did lead them with examples, and when we said, how often do you use search engines, we used Google and Bing as an example. Google Scholar and Microsoft Academic were used as examples of more scholarly web sources. And then for databases, we actually called them out. So there was either what we call general journal databases, where ProQuest, EBSCO, and JSTOR were used as examples. Citation indexes, where we used, I think it was Web of Science and EconLit as an example. And we did try to be as explicit as possible so that they understood the differences of what we were surveying. We ProQuest international data sets include lender and loan data. That's interesting. I think it would have some government data on that area. This is a fairly new resource. It's only been out for about a year or so, and they're constantly adding new things to it. But I could, if you wanted to email, I could certainly put you in touch with somebody who could tell you exactly what's in there right now. What do they use ABI for in the workplace? Probably mostly current awareness. So they keep in touch with, I think they would imagine they would use like the major news sources, the industry data, but I do know that that they like the market research sources as well. So ABI contains quite a lot of market research right now. So things like the Dun & Bradstreet First Research, the Business Monitor International reports are highly used and valued by the corporate user. Todd Hines wants to know if we're going to post these slides anywhere. I'm happy to post them. I'm not sure if ACRL Choice has an option for sending the slides out or posting them somewhere that makes them accessible. Sophie Bray wants to know if Experian, all of the ICD reports that I mentioned that are new to ABI Inform are an extra cost item. The market research sources are not typically included in ABI Global. They're available in either ABI Trade and Industry or ABI Complete. So if you are a global customer only, I'm afraid that would be an additional cost to upgrade to that. Oh, Todd mentions that in other parts of the world, private company data is much easier to get, such as EU countries. I did not know that. The 3 new products mentioned, are they all included in versions of ABI Inform or any particular version? Those are all, the 3 new products are all standalone new products. So the one slide I showed you that has additional content that's added to ABI, that is specific to ABI. But the EIU archive, JP Morgan, and the international data sets are all different standalone products that are available for separate purchase. Are there plans to create a product which would provide one of the things the business faculty asking for, a database that documents where to locate different kinds of data? That is a concept we've been playing with for probably 3 years, and I would love to do something like that. It's good to know that that interest is still there, and I'll definitely take that back to the company, and we'll keep pursuing that. I'm not surprised that the faculty have a hard time finding it. It's even difficult for us to almost conceive of that kind of product. But I do understand that it would be of immense value to people. Somebody wants to know about a one-time purchase for the EIU country reports and other pricing or cost of other enhancements to ABI. So again, everything that I mentioned, if you're an ABI Complete customer, all of that new content is included. If you're one of the components, ABI Global, you might have to look at upgrading to get all of that stuff. So the EIU country reports, there's 2 parts of that. So the current EIU country reports will be going into ABI Complete, hopefully by the end of this year. That's a new arrangement we've made with EIU, and we're working at ingesting that data right now. The back file, the archival product, is a one-time only purchase that goes from 1952 to up to 1995, and that's just a one-time purchase, an additional one-time purchase. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, it looks like we don't usually post the PowerPoint slides for these webinars anywhere public. So if you would like a copy, I would ask you to contact me at the email address that's on the slide here, and I would be happy to send it to you. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I think I will pass it back to Michelle and Jennifer to wrap things up.
All right, thank you, Joanne. I just want to give you a virtual round of applause today for spending some time with us and sharing some great information. And I just want to let everyone on the line here know that we have recorded today's program, so please be on the lookout for a follow-up email from us that will include instructions on how to access the archived version. And thanks again to all our participants for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this session and have a great